There's a building where the books are in one country and the checkout desk is in another. A street where your neighbor across the road lives in a different nation. And a golf course where you tee off in America and your ball lands in Canada. The US-Canada border is 5,500 miles of pure chaos, and we're counting down every wild fact about it. By number 1, you'll never look at the map the same way again. Fact 50. Most people picture the US-Canada border as a clean line far above the lower 48. But Seattle, Washington sits further north than Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. A major American city is at a higher latitude than 3 of Canada's biggest. Geography doesn't follow common sense, and that's exactly what makes this countdown so good. Fact 49. The border is famous for following the 49th parallel, but it's actually made up of over 900 individual zigzagging line segments. 19th century surveyors kept making small errors, correcting, then overcorrecting. The result is a border that wobbles like someone drew it with a shaky hand and called it good. Fact 48. To mark where all those zigzagging segments land in the real world, surveyors physically placed over 8,000 monuments. Iron posts, concrete pillars, stone obelisks, across mountains, swamps, rivers and forests from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It's one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in North American history, and almost nobody knows it exists. Fact 47. With 8,000 monuments spread over 5,500 miles, you'd think they'd all be evenly spaced, but in spots where the line changes direction sharply, markers end up almost on top of each other. The record? The 2 closest border monuments are just 18 inches apart. You could lie down and touch both countries at the same time. Fact 46. When most people imagine this border, they picture forests and prairies. But roughly 60% of it is water, rivers, lakes, and the Great Lakes themselves. The border cuts through Lake Superior, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. The longest international border in the world isn't mostly a land boundary. It's mostly just a very long lake. Already weirder than you thought, and we're just getting started. Wobbly survey lines, 8,000 hidden markers, mostly underwater. But we haven't hit the airports that roll into Canada mid-landing, the wars that started over farm animals, or the houses split between 2 countries. Keep watching. Fact 45. How many US states actually border Canada? The answer is 13, from Maine to Washington, plus Alaska. That's more than a quarter of all US states touching a foreign country. For comparison, only 4 states border Mexico. Canada touches more American states than any other nation on Earth. Fact 44. On the Canadian side, Ontario dominates, sharing 1,715 miles of boundary with the US, touching Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York all by itself. To put that in perspective, 1,715 miles is longer than driving from Miami to Chicago. Ontario is basically the province holding the 2 countries together at the seam. Fact 43. The shortest Canadian provincial border belongs to Alberta. Just 185 miles running along its southern edge into Montana. Alberta is one of Canada's largest, most powerful provinces, but its connection to the United States is surprisingly small compared to its neighbors. Fact 42. Which US state has the shortest border with Canada? Pennsylvania, and it's only 42 miles long. Surprise, not 1 inch of it is on land. Pennsylvania's entire Canadian border sits at the bottom of Lake Erie. It's technically an international water boundary and nothing else. Fact 41. The Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, is the busiest international border crossing in North America by trade volume. Hundreds of billions of dollars in goods, auto parts, food, technology cross that single bridge every year. If it closed tomorrow, both economies would feel it almost immediately. Records, numbers, geography basics. Done. Now the countdown gets really good. Coming up, a piece of Minnesota that's somehow north of Canada, an island only reachable by driving through a foreign country, and a lake so complicated the border gave up trying to make sense of it. Facts 40 through 31 are next. Fact 40. Despite being the second largest country on Earth, roughly 90% of all Canadians live within 100 miles of the US border. Canada has more land than the United States, but almost its entire population is huddled along one thin southern strip. The rest of the country is essentially empty. Fact 39. Pelly Island in Lake Erie is Canada's southernmost point, and it sits further south than the northern borders of California, Nevada, and Utah. Canada doesn't just sit above the United States. There's actually a piece of Canada that sneaks below chunks of the American West. Fact 38. Lake of the Woods on the Minnesota-Manitoba border contains over 14,000 islands. When 1800 surveyors tried to draw a boundary through that labyrinth, the result was a dramatic northward jag in the border, one that created a geographic anomaly we're coming back to very soon. Fact 37. The border runs directly through the middle of Niagara Falls. The falls erode backward by several feet every year. They're literally moving. Because of this, the border can't follow the waterfall. It's been legally fixed to specific GPS coordinates that grow less and less accurate every decade. Fact 36. Most people forget Alaska when they think about this border, but it contributes all 1,538 miles of the Alaska-Canada boundary on its own. That stretch runs through glaciers, mountain ranges, and boreal forests where almost no one lives. It's a border where nature is in charge and humans are just passing through. A moving waterfall, a lake with 14,000 islands, and a forgotten 1,500-mile Alaskan border. The geography alone is enough to fill a whole video. But up next, the clear-cut strip they've been mowing since 1908, and the single terrible map that caused almost all of this. Let's keep going. Fact 35. Most people don't know the US-Canada border is actually two completely separate borders. The main southern boundary runs 3,987 miles from coast to coast. Then there's an entirely disconnected second border, the 1,538-mile Alaska-Canada line up north. Two separate international boundaries between the same two countries. Fact 34. Through every forested stretch of the border, there's a 20-foot wide, clear-cut strip sliced straight through the trees, called the Vista. It's mowed and maintained, so the boundary's always visible from the ground and sky. It looks like someone took a giant lawnmower to the entire continent. Fact 33. The crew that maintains the Vista is the International Boundary Commission, a joint US-Canada organization that's been keeping that strip clear since 1908. Over a century of clearing trees and brush through mountains, swamps, tundra, and forests. One of the longest continuously maintained features in North America. Fact 32. New York City sits at roughly the same latitude as Madrid, Spain. Yet, New York gets brutal winters while Madrid is mild. Ocean currents and continental climate effects amplified by the border region create one of the most dramatic climate divides in the Northern Hemisphere, right along this boundary line. Fact 31. The original border was defined in the Treaty of Paris in 1783, using a map so inaccurate that historians are still untangling it. Rivers in the wrong place, lakes the wrong shape, mountain ranges are missing entirely. Nearly every anomaly on this countdown traces back to that one catastrophically bad piece of paper. Halfway through, and the theme is clear. The more you look at this border, the less it makes sense. Up next, we leave weird geography behind and enter the truly surreal. Places where the border doesn't just pass through towns, it passes through buildings, streets, and people's living rooms. Fact 30. In Beebe Plain, Vermont, the international border runs down the center of a street called Canusa Street. North side, Canada. South side, USA. Your neighbor directly across the road lives in a different country. An ordinary-looking street with an extraordinary legal reality. Fact 29. Derby Line, Vermont, and Stanstead's, Quebec, share a single water system. Water pumped from Canadian wells flows into an American reservoir and then to homes on both sides of the border. Two sovereign nations, one water supply, and nobody has seriously suggested changing it. Fact 28. Before modern customs enforcement, clever entrepreneurs built line houses, buildings deliberately straddling the border so they could sell alcohol or taxed goods from whichever country had the better deal at any moment. Frontier loophole engineering at its finest. Fact 27. Avey Field in Laurier, Washington has a runway that physically straddles the international boundary. You can taxi your plane across an international border without ever leaving the tarmac. The original airport planners probably didn't think that one all the way through. Fact 26. Pine Creek Airport in Minnesota goes further. Its runway doesn't just straddle the border, it crosses into Canada mid-roll. You touch down in the United States and roll into another country before you stop. No customs booth at the end of the runway. Two countries, one landing strip. A street divided in half. A shared water supply. Two airports that accidentally cross into Canada. But none of it prepares you for what's next. A library where borrowing a book is an international transaction. And an opera house where the performers and audience are in different countries. Fact 25. Derby Line has a special talent for ignoring borders. The Butterfield Tool Factory once ran with half its machinery in the US and half in Canada, split right down the building's middle. Workers crossed an international border every time they walked from one end of the factory floor to the other. Fact 24. In small border towns, mail for the US and Canada used to be sorted in a single building with two separate doors, one for each country. The same workers handled letters from both nations. A quirky but entirely practical solution to life on the line. Fact 23. The Haskell Free Library in Derby Line sits right on the boundary. The books are in Canada. The checkout desk is in the United States. A thick black line on the floor marks exactly where one country ends and the other begins. No passport needed, but you must leave through the same door you entered. Fact 22. Attached to that same building is an opera house where the stage is in Canada and most of the audience seats are in the United States. The performers are in one country. The crowd applauding them is in another. It's been running this way since 1904, and it still operates today. Fact 21. On the North Dakota-Manitoba border, the International Peace Garden is a 2,300-acre park where visitors can walk freely across the international boundary without a passport. Established in 1932 as a symbol of friendship between the two nations, it's one of the only places on Earth where an international border is decorated with flowers. From peaceful gardens to absolute chaos, numbers, geography, split towns, all done. Now we're getting into the wars that almost happened, the forts built on the wrong side of the border, and the most absurd military standoff in North American history. Facts 20 through 11. This is where it gets seriously wild. Fact 20. After the chaos of the 1783 map, it took nearly 60 more years to clean up the eastern border. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842 finally settled the main New Brunswick line and several other disputed sections, the result of two diplomats spending months untangling half a century of surveying errors and competing land claims. Fact 19. To this day, both the US and Canada claim Machias Seal Island, a 15-acre rock off the Maine coast. Canada runs a lighthouse there. The US says it's American. No shots fired, no dramatic standoffs, just two friendly nations politely insisting, for decades, that a tiny island belongs to them. Still unresolved. Fact 18. The waters around Machias Seal Island are called the Gray Zone, where lobster fishermen from both countries work side by side under completely different rules, because nobody can agree whose laws apply. American fishermen follow US regulations. Canadians follow Canadian ones. Jurisdictional anarchy happening every single day. Fact 17. In 1838, a border dispute between Maine and New Brunswick escalated into the Aroostook War, a conflict fought almost entirely by rival lumberjacks. Militias mobilized. Congress authorized emergency funds. And then, nothing happened. Not one person died. Diplomats sorted it out in 1842, and everyone went back to cutting trees. Fact 16. In 1859, the US and Britain nearly went to war because an American farmer shot a British pig eating his potatoes. American soldiers showed up. The British sent warships. At peak escalation, 500 US troops faced 5 British warships over one dead pig. Historians call it the Pig War. Somehow, nobody else died. A war over a pig. Lumberjacks who started a conflict and then just stopped. The history of this border is a blooper reel of international diplomacy. Coming up, a fort accidentally built on Canadian soil, a reservation that exists in 3 jurisdictions at once, and an Alaskan town that basically forgot it was American. Fact 15. After the War of 1812, the US began building a fort in Vermont to protect against future Canadian invasion. Walls up, construction underway. Then someone realized the surveyors had placed the 45th parallel 3/4 of a mile too far north. The fort was on Canadian soil. They nicknamed it Fort Blunder, abandoned it, and the British kept the land. Fact 14. For decades, Canada and Denmark both claimed Hans Island, an uninhabited Arctic rock. Their method? Each country's military would visit, plant a flag, and leave a bottle of their national liquor for the other side. Canada brought whiskey. Denmark brought schnapps. The most civilized territorial dispute ever, eventually resolved in 2022 by splitting the island down the middle. Fact 13. The map that caused all of this is called the Mitchell Map, drawn in 1755. 28 years before it was used to define the US-Canada border, it was based on incomplete surveys and educated guessing. Rivers misplaced, lakes the wrong size, coastlines off. Every single anomaly on this list traces back to 2 nations signing off on that one deeply flawed drawing. Fact 12. The Akwesasne St. Regis Mohawk Reservation sits where New York, Ontario, and Quebec all converge, and straddles all 3 simultaneously. The Mohawk people lived there centuries before any border existed. Today, some residents cross an international boundary just to reach a neighbor's house. Governance and law enforcement span 2 countries and 3 jurisdictions. Fact 11. Hyder, Alaska is technically American, but it uses Canadian currency, gets electricity from the neighboring BC town of Stewart, and has no road to the US that doesn't go through Canada first. Geographically isolated by mountains and hundreds of miles of Canadian wilderness, Hyder is an American town that essentially forgot to be American. 10 facts left. We've done the history, the blunders, the pig war, and the forgotten Alaskan outpost. Everything from here on is the cream of the crop. Facts so strange they barely feel real. A secession attempt over fish, a video phone in the woods as your only way home, and the one fact that ties all 50 together. Final 10. Let's go. Fact 10. The Peace Arch at the Washington-BC border has stood since 1921, marking the world's longest undefended border. It sits in a park where citizens of both countries can meet without passports. Engraved on the gates, "May these gates never be closed." In over a century, they haven't been. Fact 9. There are one-way only international border crossings along this boundary. At locations like Churubusco in New York, you can cross into Canada, but you cannot use the same checkpoint to come back. You'd have to find another crossing entirely. Limited staffing, awkward road layouts, and nobody has gotten around to fixing it. Fact 8. At the Gateway Cities Golf Club on the North Dakota-Saskatchewan border, you can tee off in the United States and land your ball in Canada. You then walk across the international boundary to take your next shot. No customs booth between the tee and the green. The only penalty for crossing the border is a potential bogey. Fact 7. Campobello Island is a Canadian territory, but the only road to reach it by land goes through Maine, USA. To drive to Canada, you must enter the United States. There's a bridge from Quebec, Maine to the island. It's Canadian soil that is, in every practical sense, only reachable through a foreign country. Fact 6. In the northwest angle, that isolated chunk of Minnesota north of the 49th parallel, there are 0 physical U.S. border officers. To re-enter the United States after crossing into Canada, you walk up to a video phone booth in the woods, pick it up, and check in with a remote agent over video. That is the entire U.S. border security system for that location. A phone in the woods, a golf course spanning 2 nations, a Canadian island only reachable through the U.S. We're 5 facts from the finish line, and these are the ones people flat out don't believe. A secession attempt over walleye, a house with a kitchen in Canada, and the single fact that explains everything. Here we go. Fact 5. The residents of the Northwest Angle once became so fed up with fishing regulations that they held a vote to secede from the United States and join Canada. The issue? Canadian rules let them fish local waters more freely. The secession was mostly a protest stunt. It made national headlines, and the rules were eventually adjusted. They stayed American, but they were dead serious about the walleye. Fact 4. Point Roberts, Washington is a small American peninsula hanging below Vancouver, BC, completely cut off from the rest of Washington state. To drive to the nearest American city, you must cross into Canada, drive 25 miles through British Columbia, and then cross back into the US. To get home to your own country, you have to leave it twice. Residents do this regularly. It's just life in Point Roberts. Fact 3. In Estcourt Station, Maine, the international border runs directly through residential buildings. Some homes have their front porch in the United States and their kitchen in Canada. This isn't a metaphor. The surveyed line passes through the actual structures. Walk from your living room to get a midnight snack and you may have technically crossed an international border. No passport required, just hunger. Fact 2. At 5,525 miles, the US-Canada border is the longest international border between any 2 countries on the planet. It spans 6 time zones, crosses mountains, prairies, forests, rivers, and 5 Great Lakes, touches 13 American states and 8 Canadian provinces and territories, and sees over 400,000 legal crossings every single day. And as you've just seen, almost every mile of it has a story. Every single thing we just covered, the Pig War, Fort Blunder, the Haskell Library, Canusa Street, the video phone in the woods, the walleye secession, the kitchen in Canada. All of it traces back to a single map drawn in 1755. Fact 1. The Mitchell Map. Used to define the border in 1783. Riddled with errors, missing rivers, wrong lakes, misplaced coastlines. 2 nations looked at a profoundly wrong drawing of a continent neither had fully explored and said, "Looks good, let's sign." The longest, most peaceful, and most bizarre border on Earth exist not because of genius diplomacy or careful planning, but because of one gloriously, catastrophically bad map. And 240 years later, we're all still living inside its mistakes. 5,525 miles, a pig war, kitchens in 2 countries, an airport that rolls into Canada, a library where checking out a book crosses an international boundary, a video phone in the woods, and one terrible, magnificent map. If this blew your mind, smash that like button and subscribe. We've got more countdowns on the strangest places and borders on Earth. And if you live near any of these spots, drop a comment below. I want to hear what life on the world's strangest border is actually like.